Peter, how could you? I slammed the ledger shut, my fingers trembling. You knew how much this place meant to Grandpa Graham. Peter looked up from his laptop, his eyes cold and unyielding. It's just a restaurant, Nat. We need to think about our future. Just a restaurant. My voice rose, echoing through the empty dining room of Sunbeam. This is our family legacy, Peter. Grandpa built this place from the ground up. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. And now it's time to think practically. We could sell it, invest the money, and secure our future. I shook my head, disbelief coursing through me. You mean your future? I can't believe you would even suggest selling Sunbeam. Peter's face hardened. You always put this place above everything else. What about us? What about our dreams? Our dreams? I laughed bitterly. Since when did our dreams involve selling out everything Grandpa worked for? Before Peter could respond, the door swung open and Charlie sauntered in, a smirk plastered on his face. Hey, big bro, what's the commotion? I glared at him, my anger bubbling over. Charlie, this is a private conversation. Charlie raised his hands in mock defense. Whoa, just trying to lighten the mood. What's got you so riled up, Nat? Peter glanced at Charlie, then back at me. Nat thinks we shouldn't sell the restaurant. Charlie chuckled, shaking his head. Of course she does. She's always been too sentimental. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. This isn't about sentimentality. It's about family, about honoring Grandpa's memory. Charlie rolled his eyes. Come on, Nat. You know Peter's right. Selling Sunbeam is the smart move. I turned to Peter, my voice trembling. Is this what you really want? To sell the restaurant and move on? Peter hesitated, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. I just think it's the best option for us. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. Well, I don't. And as long as I'm running Sunbeam, we won't sell. Peter's jaw tightened, and he stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Maybe it's time we reconsider who's running this place. My heart pounded in my chest, the weight of his words sinking in. What are you saying? Peter looked at Charlie, then back at me. Maybe it's time for a change. Maybe it's time for me to take over. I stared at him, my mind racing. You can't be serious. You don't even know how to run a restaurant. Charlie snickered. Don't worry, Nat. I'll help him out. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. This is unbelievable. You two are plotting against me. Peter's face softened for a moment, but then he hardened his resolve. It's not like that, Nat. We're just thinking about the future. The future? I spat. What about the present? What about everything we've built here? Peter's eyes narrowed. Maybe it's time to let go of the past and move forward. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. I can't believe you would do this. I thought we were in this together. Peter's expression remained cold. Things change, Nat. People change. I took a step back, my heart breaking. If you want to take over Sunbeam, you'll have to fight me for it. Peter's eyes flashed with determination. Then that's what I'll do. Charlie clapped his hands together. Well, this is going to be interesting. I turned away, my mind reeling. How had it come to this? How had the man I loved turned into someone I barely recognized? As I walked out of the dining room, I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't let Sunbeam go without a fight. Grandpa Graham's legacy was worth fighting for, even if it meant standing up to the people I once trusted the most. The door closed behind me, and I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the battle ahead. This was just the beginning. I barely slept that night, my mind swirling with thoughts of Peter's betrayal. The next morning, I arrived at Sunbeam early, determined to keep things running smoothly despite the turmoil at home. I was greeted by the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee and the sight of our regulars chatting at their usual tables. Their presence was a comforting reminder of why I fought so hard for this place. As I busied myself with the morning prep, the door swung open and Charlie strolled in, his swagger more pronounced than usual. He scanned the room before making a beeline for the counter. "Morning, Nat," he said, his tone dripping with false cheer. I forced a smile. "Charlie, What brings you here so early? He leaned against the counter, his eyes glinting with mischief. Just thought I'd drop by and see how things are going. Lend a hand if you need it. I bit back a retort. We're fine, thanks. Just another busy morning. Charlie chuckled. Busy, huh? Well, don't work too hard. You might need that energy later. I watched him saunter over to a table and plop down, waving at one of the waitresses to bring him a coffee. His presence was a dark cloud over my morning, but I couldn't let him get to me. I had a restaurant to run. As the day wore on, I noticed Peter and Charlie huddled together in a corner, their heads bent in deep conversation. My stomach churned with unease. What were they plotting now? I approached their table, my heart pounding. What's going on here? Peter looked up, his expression unreadable. Just discussing some business ideas. Business ideas? I repeated, my voice tinged with suspicion. Like what? Charlie grinned, leaning back in his chair. Oh, ways to make Sunbeam more profitable. Maybe even expand. I crossed my arms, narrowing my eyes at him. Expand? We can barely keep up with the current workload. Peter sighed, rubbing his temples. Nat, we're just exploring options. There's no harm in that. No harm. I echoed, my frustration boiling over. It feels like you're planning something behind my back. Peter's eyes hardened. You're being paranoid. We're just trying to help. Help? I scoffed. By undermining everything I've worked for? Charlie stood up, his smirk fading. Calm down, Nat. We're all family here. Family? I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. You don't know the meaning of the word. I turned and walked away, my heart heavy with anger and betrayal. As I retreated to the kitchen, I overheard snippets of their conversation, their voices low and conspiratorial. She won't budge, Peter muttered. We'll have to push harder, Charlie replied. She can't hold out forever. My blood ran cold. They were determined to take Sunbeam from me, no matter the cost. I needed to find a way to protect the restaurant and honor Grandpa Graham's legacy. Later that evening, as I was closing up, one of our regulars, Mrs. Thompson, approached me. Nat, dear, is everything all right? You seem troubled. I forced a smile, grateful for her concern. Just a lot on my mind, Mrs. Thompson. But thank you for asking. She patted my hand gently. Your grandfather was a wise man. He always said, family is like a garden. You have to tend to it, but sometimes you need to pull out the weeds. Her words struck a chord, and I felt a renewed sense of determination. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I needed to hear that. As I locked up for the night, I knew I couldn't let Peter and Charlie destroy everything Grandpa Graham had built. I had to fight back, but I needed a plan. The next morning, I arrived at Sunbeam with renewed resolve. I called a staff meeting, gathering everyone in the dining room. Listen, everyone. I began, my voice steady. There are some changes happening, and I need your support more than ever. The staff exchanged worried glances, but I pressed on. Peter and Charlie have their own ideas about the future of Sunbeam, but I believe in what we've built here. We need to stick together and keep this place running smoothly. One of the waitresses, Jenna, spoke up. We're with you, Nat. We'll do whatever it takes. I smiled, gratitude swelling in my chest. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you all. Together, we can get through this. As the day wore on, I kept a close eye on Peter and Charlie, determined to stay one step ahead. But as evening approached, a sense of foreboding settled over me. I knew the battle was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. Just as I was about to close up for the night, Peter approached me, his expression serious. Nat, we need to talk. I steeled myself, bracing for whatever he had to say. What is it? He hesitated, then finally spoke. Charlie and I have decided to bring in an investor. Someone who can help us take Sunbeam to the next level. My heart sank. This was worse than I had imagined. An investor? Without consulting me. Peter's eyes were cold. It's for the best, Nat. You'll see. I stared at him, a mixture of anger and despair flooding my senses. This was a fight for survival, and I wasn't about to back down. We'll see about that, Peter. As he walked away, I knew I had to act fast. The future of Sunbeam depended on it. The next morning, I arrived at Sunbeam feeling more determined than ever. I couldn't let Peter and Charlie's schemes destroy everything Grandpa Graham had built. As I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar warmth of the restaurant enveloped me, but the tension in my chest remained. The breakfast rush was just starting, and our regulars were trickling in. I greeted them with a smile, trying to mask the turmoil brewing inside me. Mrs. Thompson waved from her usual spot by the window, and I gave her a nod, grateful for her support. As the morning wore on, I noticed Charlie lounging at a corner table, devouring a stack of pancakes without any intention of paying. My frustration bubbled over, and I marched over to him. "Charlie, you can't keep doing this," I said, my voice low but firm. "You need to pay for your meals like everyone else." He looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. "Come on, Nat. We're family. What's a few pancakes between us?" "It's not just a few pancakes," I snapped. "It's about respect. You can't keep taking advantage of us." Charlie leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Maybe you should lighten up, Nat. You're starting to sound like a broken record." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my anger in check. "This isn't a joke, Charlie. If you want to eat here, you pay. End of discussion." He shrugged, his smirk never wavering. "Whatever you say, boss." As I walked away, I caught Peter watching us from the other side of the room, his expression unreadable. I knew he had heard every word, but he made no move to intervene. It was clear where his loyalties lay. The rest of the day passed in a blur of orders and smiles, but the tension between Peter, Charlie, and me was palpable. By the time the dinner rush hit, I was exhausted both physically and emotionally. Just as I was about to take a short break, I noticed Peter and Charlie huddled together in the corner, their heads bent in deep conversation. My heart sank. What were they plotting now? I approached them, my heart pounding. "What's going on?" Peter looked up, his expression guarded. "Nothing you need to worry about." "Nothing I need to worry about?" I repeated, my voice rising. "This is my restaurant, Peter. I have every right to know what's happening." Charlie snickered. "Relax, Nat. We're just discussing some business ideas." I crossed my arms, narrowing my eyes at him. "Business ideas? Like what?" Peter sighed, rubbing his temples. "Nat, we're just trying to find ways to make Sunbeam more profitable. You need to trust us." "Trust you?" I scoffed. "After everything you've done, you expect me to trust you?" Peter's eyes flashed with anger. "You're being unreasonable. We're trying to help." "Help?" I spat. "By undermining everything I've worked for?" Before Peter could respond, the door swung open and a tall, well-dressed man walked in. He scanned the room before making his way over to us. "Ah, there you are," he said, extending a hand to Peter. "I'm Mr. Anderson, the investor you spoke with." My heart sank. An investor? Without consulting me? Peter shook Mr. Anderson's hand, his expression smug. "Mr. Anderson, this is my wife, Natalie. She runs Sunbeam." Mr. Anderson turned to me, his smile polite but distant. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Walker. I've heard great things about this place." I forced a smile, my mind racing. "Likewise, Mr. Anderson. But I'm afraid I'm not aware of any plans to bring in an investor." Peter's eyes narrowed. "Nat, we discussed this. It's for the best." I turned to Mr. Anderson, my voice steady. "I'm sorry, but any decisions about Sunbeam need to be made with my full involvement." Mr. Anderson raised an eyebrow, glancing between Peter and me. "I see. Perhaps we should discuss this further." Peter's face hardened, but he nodded. "Of course. Let's step outside." As they walked out, Charlie leaned in, his voice low. "You can't keep fighting this, Nat. You're outnumbered." I stared at him, my resolve hardening. "We'll see about that." The rest of the evening passed in a haze of tension and uncertainty. As I locked up for the night, I knew I needed a plan. Peter and Charlie were determined to take Sunbeam from me, and now they had an investor on their side. But I wasn't about to back down. Grandpa Graham's legacy was worth fighting for, and I would do whatever it took to protect it. The next morning, I arrived at Sunbeam with a renewed sense of determination. I called a staff meeting, gathering everyone in the dining room. Listen, everyone. I began, my voice steady. There are some changes happening, and I need your support more than ever. The staff exchanged worried glances, but I pressed on. Peter and Charlie have brought in an investor, and they're trying to take control of Sunbeam. But I believe in what we've built here. We need to stick together and keep this place running smoothly. Jenna, one of the waitresses, spoke up. We're with you, Nat. We'll do whatever it takes. I smiled, gratitude swelling in my chest. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you all. Together, we can get through this. As the day wore on, I kept a close eye on Peter and Charlie, determined to stay one step ahead. But as evening approached, a sense of foreboding settled over me. I knew the battle was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. Just as I was about to close up for the night, Peter approached me, his expression serious. Nat, we need to talk. I steeled myself, bracing for whatever he had to say. What is it? He hesitated, then finally spoke. Charlie and I have decided to bring in an investor. Someone who can help us take Sunbeam to the next level. My heart sank. This was worse than I had imagined. An investor? Without consulting me. Peter's eyes were cold. It's for the best, Nat. You'll see. I stared at him, a mixture of anger and despair flooding my senses. This was a fight for survival, and I wasn't about to back down. We'll see about that, Peter. As he walked away, I knew I had to act fast. The future of Sunbeam depended on it. The next morning, I arrived at Sunbeam with a sense of dread gnawing at my insides. The thought of Peter and Charlie bringing in an investor without my consent was unbearable. I had to find a way to protect the restaurant and Grandpa Graham's legacy. As I walked through the dining room, I noticed Peter and Charlie in their usual corner, whispering intently. My heart pounded as I approached them, determined to get some answers. What's going on this time? I demanded, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. Peter looked up, his expression guarded. Nat, we need to talk. Now. Charlie smirked, clearly enjoying the tension. Yeah, Nat. Let's have a family discussion. I followed them into the office, my heart racing. Peter closed the door behind us, his face a mask of seriousness. Nat, he began, we've decided to move forward with the investor. Mr. Anderson is willing to put a significant amount of money into Sunbeam, but he has conditions. Conditions? I echoed, my voice rising. What kind of conditions? Peter glanced at Charlie before continuing. He wants control over the restaurant's operations. He believes he can make Sunbeam more profitable. My blood ran cold. Control? You mean he wants to take over? Peter sighed, rubbing his temples. It's not like that, Nat. He just wants to ensure the restaurant's success. I shook my head, disbelief coursing through me. This is our family's legacy, Peter. You can't just hand it over to a stranger. Charlie snickered. Maybe it's time for some fresh ideas, Nat. You've been running this place into the ground. I glared at him, my anger boiling over. I won't let this happen. Sunbeam is staying in the family. Peter's eyes hardened. You don't have a choice, Nat. The deal is already in motion. My heart pounded in my chest, the weight of his words sinking in. They had gone behind my back, and now they were forcing my hand. I needed to act fast. As I stormed out of the office, I couldn't help but overhear their hushed conversation. She'll come around, Peter muttered. She better, Charlie replied, or we'll have to push harder. Their words fueled my determination. I couldn't let them win. I needed a plan, and I needed it fast. Later that evening, as I was closing up, Mrs. Thompson approached me. Nat, dear, you seem troubled. Is everything all right? I forced a smile, grateful for her concern. Just a lot on my mind, Mrs. Thompson. But thank you for asking. She patted my hand gently. You know, your grandfather was a wise man. He always said, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Her words struck a chord, and I felt a renewed sense of determination. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I needed to hear that. As I locked up for the night, I knew I needed to take action. I couldn't let Peter and Charlie destroy everything Grandpa Graham had built. I needed to protect Sunbeam and its legacy. The next morning, I arrived at Sunbeam with a plan. I called a staff meeting, gathering everyone in the dining room. Listen, everyone. I began, my voice steady. There are some changes happening, and I need your support more than ever. The staff exchanged worried glances, but I pressed on. Peter and Charlie have brought in an investor, and they're trying to take control of Sunbeam. But I believe in what we've built here. We need to stick together and keep this place running smoothly. Jenna, one of the waitresses, spoke up. We're with you, Nat. We'll do whatever it takes. I smiled, gratitude swelling in my chest. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you all. Together, we can get through this. As the day wore on, I kept a close eye on Peter and Charlie, determined to stay one step ahead. But as evening approached, a sense of foreboding settled over me. I knew the battle was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. Just as I was about to close up for the night, Peter approached me, his expression serious. Nat, we need to talk. I steeled myself, bracing for whatever he had to say. What is it? He hesitated, then finally spoke. Mr. Anderson has decided to visit Sunbeam tomorrow. He wants to see the place for himself before finalizing the deal. My heart sank. This was worse than I had imagined. And you expect me to just go along with it? Peter's eyes were cold. It's for the best, Nat. You'll see. I stared at him, a mixture of anger and despair flooding my senses. This was a fight for survival, and I wasn't about to back down. We'll see about that, Peter. As he walked away, I knew I had to act fast. The future of Sunbeam depended on it. That night, I stayed up late, poring over the restaurant's records and finances. There had to be something I could use to stop this deal. As I flipped through the pages, I stumbled upon a document that made my heart skip a beat. It was a letter from Grandpa Graham, written shortly before his death. In it, he detailed his wishes for Sunbeam, including a clause that stated the restaurant could not be sold or transferred without the unanimous consent of all family members. This was it. This was my lifeline. The next morning, I arrived at Sunbeam with the letter in hand. I called another staff meeting, my heart pounding with anticipation. Everyone, I have something important to share. I began, holding up the letter. This is a letter from Grandpa Graham, detailing his wishes for Sunbeam. According to this clause, the restaurant cannot be sold or transferred without the unanimous consent of all family members. The staff exchanged shocked glances, and Jenna spoke up. Does that mean they can't go through with the deal? I nodded, a sense of relief washing over me. Exactly. As long as I don't consent, they can't sell Sunbeam. The staff erupted in cheers, and I felt a renewed sense of hope. But I knew the battle wasn't over yet. I still had to face Peter and Charlie. As I walked into the office, letter in hand, I felt a surge of determination. This was my chance to protect Sunbeam and honor Grandpa Graham's legacy. Peter and Charlie looked up as I entered, their expressions a mix of surprise and annoyance. What is it now, Nat? Peter asked, his voice tinged with frustration. I held up the letter, my voice steady. This is a letter from Grandpa Graham. According to this clause, Sunbeam cannot be sold or transferred without the unanimous consent of all family members. Peter's face paled, and Charlie's smirk faded. What? Peter muttered, snatching the letter from my hand. I watched as they read the letter, their expressions shifting from disbelief to anger. You can't be serious, Charlie spat. This can't be legal. It's perfectly legal, I replied, my voice firm. And it means you can't go through with the deal without my consent. Peter's eyes flashed with anger. You think this changes anything? We'll find a way around it. I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. You can try, but I won't let you destroy Sunbeam. This is our family's legacy, and I will fight for it. As I walked out of the office, I felt a sense of triumph. The battle was far from over, but I had taken the first step in protecting Sunbeam. And I knew that, with the support of my staff and the memory of Grandpa Graham guiding me, I could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The morning after discovering Grandpa Graham's letter, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I knew I had a legal foothold to prevent Peter and Charlie from selling Sunbeam, but I also knew they wouldn't give up easily. As I walked into the restaurant, the familiar hum of activity greeted me. The kitchen buzzed with the sounds of sizzling pans and clattering dishes, and the dining room was filled with the chatter of our regulars. I spotted Peter and Charlie in their usual corner, their expressions dark and brooding. Ignoring the knot in my stomach, I approached them, determined to stand my ground. "Morning," I said, my voice steady. "We need to talk about Grandpa Graham's letter." Peter's eyes flashed with anger. "There's nothing to talk about, Nat. That letter won't stop us." Charlie leaned back in his chair, a smug grin on his face. "Yeah, Nat. You think a piece of paper is going to change anything?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "It's not just a piece of paper. It's Grandpa's wishes, and it's legally binding." Peter's jaw tightened. "We'll see about that. We've got our own lawyer looking into it." My heart skipped a beat, but I refused to let them see my fear. "Do what you have to do, but I won't let you destroy Sunbeam." As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much worse. I needed to be prepared for whatever they threw at me. Later that afternoon, as I was going over the day's receipts, I overheard Peter and Charlie talking in hushed tones. I crept closer, straining to hear their conversation. "We need to find a way to get her out of the picture," Charlie muttered. Peter sighed. "I know, but how? She's got that letter, and the staff is on her side." Charlie leaned in, his voice low and conspiratorial. "What if we make it look like she's unfit to run the place? We could stage something, make it seem like she's losing control." My blood ran cold. They were plotting to undermine me, to make me look incompetent. I had to act fast. That evening, I gathered the staff for an emergency meeting. "Listen, everyone." I began, my voice trembling with urgency. "Peter and Charlie are planning something to make it look like I'm unfit to run Sunbeam. We need to be vigilant and stick together." Jenna stepped forward, her expression determined. "We'll watch your back, Nat. They won't get away with this." I nodded, grateful for their support. "Thank you. Together we can protect Sunbeam." The next few days were tense, with Peter and Charlie watching my every move. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for me to slip up, but I refused to give them the satisfaction. One evening, as I was closing up, I noticed a strange smell coming from the kitchen. My heart pounded as I rushed in, only to find a small fire smoldering in the corner. Panic surged through me, but I quickly grabbed the fire extinguisher and put it out. As the smoke cleared, Peter and Charlie appeared in the doorway, their expressions a mix of surprise and disappointment. "What happened?" Peter demanded. I glared at him, my suspicion growing. "It looks like someone left a burner on, but I doubt it was an accident." Charlie's smirk faded. "Are you accusing us of something, Nat?" I took a step forward, my voice steady. "I'm saying that I'll do whatever it takes to protect Sunbeam. If you think you can scare me into giving up, you're wrong." Peter's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." As they walked away, I knew the battle was far from over. They were getting desperate, and I had to stay one step ahead. The next morning, I arrived at Sunbeam with a plan. I called another staff meeting, my heart pounding with anticipation. "Everyone, we need to be extra vigilant. Peter and Charlie are getting desperate, and they'll do anything to make me look incompetent." Jenna nodded, her expression resolute. "We'll keep an eye on everything, Nat. They won't get away with this." As the day wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. I kept a close watch on Peter and Charlie, determined to catch them in the act. That evening, as I was going over the day's receipts, I heard raised voices coming from the dining room. My heart raced as I rushed out to see what was happening. Peter and Charlie were arguing with one of our regulars, Mr. Johnson, who looked visibly upset. "You can't just treat Nat like this," Mr. Johnson shouted. "She's done nothing but work hard for this place." Peter's face was red with anger. "Mind your own business, Johnson. This is a family matter." I stepped forward, my voice steady. What's going on here? Mr. Johnson turned to me, his expression filled with concern. They were trying to convince me that you're unfit to run Sunbeam. But I know better. I felt a surge of gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Your support means everything to me. Peter glared at me, his eyes filled with hatred. This isn't over, Nat. We'll find a way to take what's rightfully ours. I met his gaze, my resolve unwavering. Do what you have to do, Peter. But I won't let you destroy Sunbeam. As I walked away, I knew the stakes had never been higher. Peter and Charlie were determined to take Sunbeam from me, but I was equally determined to protect it. The battle was far from over, but I was ready for whatever came next. The days following the confrontation with Peter and Charlie were a blur of tension and unease. I could feel the walls closing in, and every moment at Sunbeam felt like walking on a tightrope. My mind raced with plans and counterplans, but I knew I had to stay focused. The future of everything I loved was hanging by a thread. One evening, just as I was about to close up, Peter walked in, his expression grim. He held a stack of papers in his hand, and my heart sank. I knew this was it. Nat, we need to talk, he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. What is it, Peter? He handed me the papers, and I felt my hands tremble as I read the top page. Divorce papers. My world tilted, and I struggled to keep my composure. You're really doing this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Peter's eyes were cold. It's for the best. Sign these and we can move forward. I'll buy your share of Sunbeam, and you can walk away. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. Walk away? You think I can just walk away from everything Grandpa Graham built? From everything we've built together? Peter's expression didn't waver. It's the best option for both of us. This constant fighting isn't good for anyone. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. You don't get it, do you? Sunbeam is more than just a business. It's our family's legacy. Peter sighed, rubbing his temples. Nat, please. Just sign the papers. We can both move on. I looked at him, my heart breaking. I can't do that, Peter. I won't let you and Charlie destroy everything. He clenched his jaw, frustration evident. Then you're leaving me no choice. As he walked away, I felt a mixture of despair and determination. I couldn't let them win. I had to find a way to protect Sunbeam, no matter the cost. The next morning, I arrived at Sunbeam with a heavy heart. I called another staff meeting, my voice trembling as I spoke. Everyone, Peter has served me with divorce papers. He's trying to buy my share of Sunbeam, but I won't let that happen. We need to stick together and fight for this place. Jenna stepped forward, her eyes filled with concern. What can we do, Nat? I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. We need to show that Sunbeam is thriving under our management. We need to prove that we're a strong, united team. The staff nodded, their determination mirroring my own. We're with you, Nat, Jenna said, her voice steady. We'll do whatever it takes. As the days passed, I threw myself into the work, determined to keep Sunbeam running smoothly. But the tension between Peter, Charlie, and me was palpable. Every interaction felt like a battle, and I knew the final confrontation was looming. One evening, as I was closing up, I overheard Peter and Charlie talking in the office. Their voices were low, but the urgency in their tones was unmistakable. We need to push harder, Charlie muttered. She's not backing down. Peter sighed. I know, but what else can we do? Charlie leaned in, his voice filled with malice. We make her look like she's lost control. We stage a few incidents, make it seem like she's unfit to run the place. My blood ran cold. They were planning to sabotage Sunbeam and make me look incompetent. I had to act fast. The next morning, I called another staff meeting, my heart pounding with urgency. Everyone, Peter and Charlie, are planning to sabotage Sunbeam to make me look unfit to run it. We need to be extra vigilant and prevent any incidents. Jenna's eyes widened with shock. How can they do that? I shook my head, my resolve hardening. It doesn't matter. We just need to stay one step ahead. As the day wore on, I kept a close eye on everything, determined to catch any signs of sabotage. But as evening approached, a sense of foreboding settled over me. I knew the final showdown was imminent. Just as I was about to close up for the night, Peter stormed in, his face contorted with rage. "Nat, you need to leave. Now." I stared at him, my heart racing. "What are you talking about?" He held up a piece of paper, his hands shaking with anger. "This is an eviction notice. You have 2 weeks to vacate the premises." My world tilted, and I struggled to keep my composure. "You can't do this, Peter. Sunbeam is my home." Peter's eyes were cold and unyielding. "It's already done. Sign the divorce papers, and you can walk away with something. Refuse, and you'll lose everything." I felt a surge of despair and determination. This was it, the final battle for Sunbeam. I looked at Peter, my resolve unwavering. "I'll fight you every step of the way." As he walked away, I knew the stakes had never been higher. Everything was at risk, and I had to find a way to protect Sunbeam. The future of everything I loved depended on it. The 2 weeks leading up to the eviction deadline were a whirlwind of emotions and frantic activity. I knew I had to find a way to protect Sunbeam and the legacy Grandpa Graham had left behind. Every day felt like a ticking time bomb, and I was determined to defuse it before it exploded. I spent countless hours meeting with lawyers, trying to find any loophole or legal strategy to counter Peter's eviction notice. But the reality was grim. Peter had the upper hand, and my options were dwindling. One evening, as I was closing up, Jenna approached me, her face etched with concern. "Nat, we need to talk." I looked up from the stack of papers on my desk, my heart heavy. "What is it, Jenna?" She took a deep breath, her eyes filled with worry. "I overheard Peter and Charlie talking earlier. They're planning something big for the day of the eviction. I don't know what it is, but it sounded serious." My heart pounded in my chest. "Did you hear any specifics?" Jenna shook her head. "No, but they mentioned bringing in some people to help them. It sounded like they were going to stage something to make you look bad." I clenched my fists, anger and determination surging through me. "Thank you for telling me, Jenna. We need to be prepared for anything." The next day I called another staff meeting, my voice trembling with urgency. "Everyone, Peter and Charlie are planning something big for the day of the eviction. We need to be on high alert and ready to counter whatever they throw at us." The staff exchanged worried glances, but their resolve was clear. "We're with you, Nat," Jenna said, her voice steady. "We'll do whatever it takes to protect Sunbeam." As the eviction deadline approached, the tension in the air was palpable. Every interaction with Peter and Charlie felt like a battle, and I knew the final showdown was imminent. On the day of the eviction, I arrived at Sunbeam early, my heart pounding with anticipation. I had spent the previous night going over every detail, preparing for whatever Peter and Charlie had planned. The staff was on high alert, ready to support me in any way they could. Just as the lunch rush was winding down, Peter and Charlie stormed in, flanked by a group of men in suits. My heart sank as I recognized Mr. Anderson, the investor they had been courting. Peter's face was a mask of determination. "Nat, it's time. You need to leave." I took a deep breath, my resolve unwavering. "I'm not going anywhere, Peter. This is my home, and I won't let you take it from me." Mr. Anderson stepped forward, his expression cold and calculating. "Mrs. Walker, I'm here to finalize the deal. If you refuse to leave, we'll have no choice but to call the authorities." I felt a surge of anger and desperation. "You can't do this. Sunbeam is my family's legacy. I have every right to be here." Peter's eyes flashed with anger. "You had your chance, Nat. Now it's time to move on." As the tension reached a boiling point, the door swung open and Mrs. Thompson walked in, followed by a group of our regulars. They looked determined, their presence a powerful reminder of the community we had built. "What's going on here?" Mrs. Thompson demanded, her voice filled with authority. Peter glared at her. "This is none of your business. We're just finalizing a deal." Mrs. Thompson stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "It is our business. Sunbeam is more than just a restaurant. It's a part of this community, and we won't let you destroy it. The regulars nodded in agreement, their support a powerful force. I felt a surge of gratitude and determination. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. Thank you all. Mr. Anderson looked taken aback, clearly not expecting this level of resistance. This is highly irregular, he muttered. Peter's face contorted with rage. Enough. We're done here. As he reached for the phone to call the authorities, I stepped forward, my voice steady and resolute. Wait, there's one more thing. I pulled out Grandpa Graham's letter, holding it up for everyone to see. This letter states that Sunbeam cannot be sold or transferred without the unanimous consent of all family members. As long as I don't consent, you can't go through with this deal. Mr. Anderson's eyes narrowed as he read the letter, his expression shifting from frustration to resignation. It appears you have a valid point, Mrs. Walker. Peter's face paled, and Charlie's smirk faded. What? Peter muttered, snatching the letter from my hand. I met his gaze, my resolve unwavering. You can't win, Peter. Sunbeam is my home, and I will fight for it with everything I have. As the tension reached its peak, Peter's face contorted with rage. This isn't over, Nat. We'll find a way. I looked at him, my heart filled with determination. Do what you have to do, Peter. But I won't let you destroy Sunbeam. As he stormed out, followed by Mr. Anderson and the men in suits, I felt a sense of triumph and relief. The battle was far from over, but I had taken a crucial step in protecting Sunbeam. The regulars gathered around me, their support a powerful reminder of the community we had built. We're with you, Nat, Mrs. Thompson said, her voice filled with conviction. We'll fight for Sunbeam together. I nodded, gratitude swelling in my chest. Thank you. Together we can protect Sunbeam and honor Grandpa Graham's legacy. As I looked around at the faces of the people who had become my family, I knew that I was not alone in this fight. The future of Sunbeam was uncertain, but with their support, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity and anticipation. Despite the looming threat, we managed to keep Sunbeam running smoothly, thanks to the unwavering support of the staff and our regulars. But the tension was palpable, and I knew the final confrontation was inevitable. On the day of the eviction, I arrived at Sunbeam early, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and determination. The staff was already there, their faces set with resolve. Mrs. Thompson and a group of regulars had gathered outside, ready to stand with me. As the clock ticked closer to the deadline, Peter and Charlie arrived, accompanied by Mr. Anderson and a couple of lawyers. My heart sank, but I steeled myself for the battle ahead. Peter stepped forward, his expression a mask of determination. Nat, it's time. You need to leave. I took a deep breath, my voice steady. I'm not going anywhere, Peter. Sunbeam is my home, and I won't let you take it from me. Mr. Anderson cleared his throat, his expression cold. Mrs. Walker, we have legal grounds to proceed with the eviction. If you refuse to leave, we will call the authorities. I felt a surge of anger and desperation. You think you can just bulldoze over everything we've built here? This isn't just a restaurant. It's a part of this community. Peter's eyes flashed with anger. Enough, Nat. This is for the best. As the tension reached its peak, the door swung open, and a familiar figure walked in. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized the man standing there. Mr. Roberts, Grandpa Graham's old lawyer. What's going on here? Mr. Roberts demanded, his voice filled with authority. Peter glared at him. This is none of your business. We're finalizing a deal. Mr. Roberts stepped forward, his eyes blazing. It is my business. I was Graham's lawyer, and I have a vested interest in ensuring his wishes are honored. He turned to me, his expression softening. Natalie, may I see that letter from your grandfather? I handed him the letter, my hands trembling. Mr. Roberts read it carefully, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. Finally, he looked up, his voice steady. This letter is indeed legally binding. According to Graham's wishes, Sunbeam cannot be sold or transferred without the unanimous consent of all family members. As long as Natalie does not consent, this deal cannot proceed. Mr. Anderson's face paled, and Peter's expression turned to one of fury. You can't be serious, Peter spat. This can't be happening. Mr. Roberts met his gaze, unwavering. It's happening, Peter. You have no legal grounds to evict Natalie or take control of Sunbeam. As the reality of the situation sank in, Peter's face contorted with rage. This isn't over, Nat. We'll find a way. I looked at him, my resolve unwavering. Do what you have to do, Peter. But I won't let you destroy Sunbeam. As he stormed out, followed by Mr. Anderson and the lawyers, I felt a sense of triumph and relief. The battle was far from over, but I had taken a crucial step in protecting Sunbeam. The regulars gathered around me, their support a powerful reminder of the community we had built. We're with you, Nat, Mrs. Thompson said, her voice filled with conviction. We'll fight for Sunbeam together. I nodded, gratitude swelling in my chest. Thank you. Together we can protect Sunbeam and honor Grandpa Graham's legacy. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere at Sunbeam shifted. With Peter and Charlie out of the picture, we focused on rebuilding and strengthening our community. The staff worked tirelessly, and the regulars continued to show their unwavering support. One evening, as I was closing up, I took a moment to reflect on the journey we had been through. The battles, the betrayals, and the triumphs had all led to this moment. I felt a sense of peace and accomplishment, knowing that I had honored Grandpa Graham's legacy and protected the place he had built with so much love and dedication. As I turned off the lights and locked the door, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Sunbeam was more than just a restaurant. It was a symbol of resilience, community, and the enduring power of family. With the support of the people who had become my family, I knew that Sunbeam would continue to thrive. And as I walked away, I felt a sense of hope and excitement for the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The battle for Sunbeam had been hard-fought, but in the end, we had emerged stronger and more united than ever. And as I looked back at the glowing sign above the door, I knew that Grandpa Graham would be proud of what we had accomplished. Sunbeam was our home, our legacy, and our future. And with the love and support of our community, we would continue to shine brightly for years to come.